Mothers come in all sizes, shapes, backgrounds. But one thing that all mothers have in common is they ache for their children. This episode of Survivor Angels is about heartache and hope. Please stay with us.
It's time for Survivor Angels, an approach to strengthen trauma survivors. Here, you can escape what draws negativity and engage your positive abilities and the gifts that you've always had. Let's activate your angels. And to help you on that journey, here's Chaplain Jody.
On this episode of Survivor Angels, I have Jamie Randall Nash and Laura Catterlick with me. Two people, I have a really bright light there on me, lighting me up, but two people that I have known for quite a few years. I kind of feel like they're my own girls in certain ways. So thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to start with Laura because I know she's got to bug out a little bit early, and when she does, Jamie, we'll just kind of keep rolling here and everything. Laura, our subject tonight is our children that we have lost. It's a topic that is not foreign to a lot of people. I think it's a topic that isn't discussed enough. So
Yep.
tell us your story.
Well, I have had 3 miscarriages. Back that up. I had one very normal pregnancy right from the get-go. Never had any issues, never foresaw having any issues in the future. And then got pregnant again, about 5 years, I think it was 5 years after our daughter was born, with a set of twin girls. Super excited for that. However, I never did feel like that pregnancy felt real, and it never made it past, I think, 10 weeks. Lost them, had a D&C, waited another 2 years, got pregnant again, randomly one day just felt a twinge of pain and started bleeding, and lost that pregnancy naturally, and then got pregnant again less than a year later. I want to say 4 or 5 months later, and that pregnancy was going really well. In fact, I was even feeling pregnant, feeling sick. And then one day I went in for an appointment and just no heartbeat after having a very good, strong heartbeat the day or the week before, because I had been going in every week since I had 2 losses already. So she was doing that just to allow me to have a little bit more ease and comfort with things. And everything had looked good. We were 10 weeks there, and then all of a sudden, it looked good until it didn't look good.
Any reason why? Could the doctor give you any explanation?
Well, for the third one, yes, she had Turner syndrome, which is, I know most people are probably kind of familiar with. It's a syndrome where you are missing one of your female chromosomes or part of it. You may not be missing the whole thing. And women can actually live with it. You have a lot of disabilities with it, but you can live with it. And I think you can never have your own children, stuff like that. You have a lot of hormonal issues. So that was that pregnancy. Second pregnancy, they were never able to find anything. They did testing on it, but didn't really give me a conclusive answer. So that was unfortunate. And the first one, they had a certain type of trisomy, and I can't remember for the life of me which one it was, but it was one that you can't survive with. So I could have carried them a little longer, but I would have lost them eventually.
Okay.
So we did a bunch of testing and just got told nothing looked wrong or out of place on our end. And she just said, I think you've gotten struck by lightning 3 times.
Wow. And that's probably a really good way to put it. I never thought of it like that, but it creates quite an image when you say that. All right, Jamie, your story.
Well, so my husband and I got married in 2004. We had stopped using any type of birth control pretty much from the get-go, but weren't necessarily anxious to have kids immediately. So then we went through quite a bit of about 4 or 5 years with nothing, and again, that was with no trying or planning or whatever, but that's kind of a long time without any thing blocking it, so to say. So we ended up going into to the Center of Reproductive Medicine. So we did seek out some help. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovaries. So then I was put on a couple different medications. And then in addition to that, they do a test, this is a funny story. And my poor husband, he's not here to hear the story, but we had to have a histosalpingogram, which they just called an HSG because it's a lot shorter to say HSG, but when you get the paperwork and it tells you what your medications are, the doctor's explaining the test and Rich is counting how many letters. He's like, I'm like, that's not important right now. We couldn't get past that this word had 19 letters or something ridiculous like that. But anyways, so we had to have a test done. It did find out that I had an ovarian polyp that was blocking the opening to one of my fallopian tubes. So they do a test. Essentially, they give contrast into the uterus. So it's considered a DNC. They do dilate and clean out, essentially. But they put contrast in, and then they the goal is to get it to swoosh to see if it goes up into the fallopian tubes as the path that it should take. But one of mine was not open. And so I had one fallopian tube that was not accessible. So I ended up having another DNC surgery to have that removed. So they kind of cleaned out the whole inside of my uterus, and whether that was development of something else or I was born with it, they really don't know. It could have just been my scar tissue from something else. They don't really know what that was, but they cleaned that out. And then we went through another round of treatment. We did 5 rounds of IUI, which is used to be called artificial insemination, but now it's intrauterine insemination is how they do it. So I was put on a medication. They time out the timing of all of your cycle. And then they have the male visit the clinic and do their business, collect it in a cup. And then I go back a couple hours later because then they've kind of washed it down to the successful sperm. And his sperm count was on the lower side and not necessarily total sperm, but he also had low motility. So the sperm that were good sperm were slow. So even if they looked good, like what their shape and everything was. So we learned in a really short time how difficult and how many things have to go right for a pregnancy to occur. And I remember Rich asking, they told us in high school it takes one time. And it's not taking us. And so I think that was his education level of, reproductive. That was his experience of what it takes to get pregnant was one time. And the amount of things that have to go right in order for the pregnancy to occur, and then also for the pregnancy to continue, there is so many things. So it's like such a crazy miracle in and itself. But we did, after the 5th round of insemination, we did conceive. We found out we were pregnant. Trying to think at what point I don't remember when I found out. I think it was like in May at some point. Everything was going well for the most part, feeling good. But then at my 20-week ultrasound, went in and they noticed seemed small, wasn't a lot of fluid, and that there was a little bit of dilated kidney. So they wanted me to come back in 4 weeks. So I came back for a 24-week ultrasound. And that was one of those, Laura, I don't know if you experienced it, or Jody, if you have at any point in where they're like, their facial expression of excitement goes from like, this is a really fun, we get to see the baby and the heartbeat, to all of a sudden, okay, her face changed majorly. And all of a sudden we're like scanning and we're not talking at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
We're kind of sitting there and she's like, I'm going to be right back. So then she left and brought another doctor in and had the OB do the scanning. And we both kind of sat there. We're like, what's going on? This is weird. So we found out that day that they thought potentially that our baby had Downs or trisomy of some sort, because many of the things that they saw, there were 4 chambers of the heart, but the blood flow wasn't correct. So there was some regurgitation one way or the other. There was some regurgitation in the umbilical cord. So that was kind of, the blood was kind of going back and forth. There was dilated colon, dilated kidneys. So kind of a lot of things all in one, but a lot of them pointed to some type of a syndrome that kind of a syndrome. Downs was the first one that they thought, and then trisomy. And I want to say trisomy 18, but I could be wrong on that. That was the assumption. So then they had scheduled me to have a level 2 ultrasound with a perinatologist. And these are the dates that we talked about memory at some point, but it was a Wednesday I went in. On Friday, I went in to the perinatologist and we were sitting there, and basically she said, there is not a chance of survival for your baby. Our fluid levels were far too low to sustain a pregnancy. The heart wasn't functioning properly. The blood flow wasn't proper to the baby in the first place. From what she could tell, my placenta did not look healthy, but she didn't really know. It just didn't look right. She couldn't predict what that meant. It just didn't look the same as how it should. She suspected there was some blood clots in it, but they really didn't know what truly caused it. So after that day, we did an amnio that day to kind of see if there was something genetic that would come back to kind of give us a clue as to why. And that came back normal, which was probably the hardest thing, because you want something to blame, that it's a strike of lightning. Right. That doesn't make sense, but then it came to, on that Sunday afternoon, I had quit feeling movement, which they told us the amnio would probably potentially accelerate the time, but that they didn't think the baby would even live. There wasn't enough fluid in general to sustain. So taking the little bit that was left was still kind of scary. And so Sunday we quit feeling movement. We went in Sunday evening. I actually called my own doctor, who is a good friend of our family's, and was like, can I sneak through the back door? And can you just check if I'm not being crazy? Like, I don't want to be that crazy woman. So I went in through the back door of the doctor's office. She did the Doppler and she couldn't find anything. So we headed to United. We went to the hospital. They hooked me up immediately to 1,000 different machines. They did an ultrasound and confirmed the baby had passed. And normally they would have sent me home to prepare for an induction the next day. But my blood pressure when I got there was 210 over 160. So they were like, I'm not sure how you're alive and how you're like functioning, right, that I should be either having a stroke or a seizure. And they repeated it every 2 minutes just to confirm that it wasn't just a machine error kind of thing, because that's so high. It wasn't. It consistently stayed that way. They ended up putting me on some meds, and I was on some magnesium and lots of different meds. They did induce me that night, so we stayed there starting at about 9 o'clock that night, I think it was. They started the induction, and I delivered our stillborn little girl. We named her Angel, born an angel. We delivered her at about 11, I think it was, the next morning. I did have both mothers, my mom and Rich's mom, were in the delivery room at the time. Originally, the plan was just my mom and Rich if we had a delivery. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to be there for Rich, and he wasn't going to be able to be there for me, that we kind of both needed our mommies. Like we both needed that person. And so we delivered, and the hospitals do a remarkable job. They put a little purple butterfly on the outside of your door so that every staff member that walks in knows that your child is passed. So I had a purple little butterfly that was outside so that everyone walked through the door knew that, the baby had passed. So they didn't say, oh, congratulations, and kind of put their foot in the mouth, kind of thing. So the hospital was actually really, really good about it all. The nurses were amazing. We ended up having, we did a funeral service a couple days later, which that is a whole nother story, because it was a hot mess, but because we were a hot
Well,
mess.
and we'll come back to that. I know Laura has to go, but Laura, there's
Yeah.
one more question that I want to
Yeah.
ask you.
Absolutely.
It's actually kind of a two-part. What would you say was the most traumatic piece of any of them, of losing any of them? And then at the same time, where do you feel like maybe the angels came into you? Because I know, like Jamie, you named your little one Angel, so I know you both have a feeling for angels and when they're present and everything. What do you think, Laura?
Well, I would say the most traumatic, I'd say of all three of them, was probably the second one. And the reason for that being I passed that one at home by myself. So I saw, out came a sack and it was a little baby. I could see the little baby in there, and I took a bunch of pictures of it and saved it and brought it into the hospital so that they could take it off for testing. And I proudly show it to people if they want to see it because I'm not ashamed of it. My baby.
Right?
So yeah, and so that I'd say that was the most traumatic part. I feel like having the DNCs, yes, they were terrible, but it's a little bit easier. It was a little easier for me to go through with you're having a surgery, and when you wake up from the surgery, you're just not going to be pregnant anymore. And again, like Jamie said, the hospital does a really good job. I hope all hospitals are like this around here, but down here, we have an organization called IRIS, stands for Infants Remembered in Silence. And they'll work with families in the area that have miscarriages, stillbirths, lose a kid at any age, really. It could be a teenager or, a young child. We've had a couple of younger kids over the past few years die of like influenza and stuff down here. And they work with those families too. So they hooked us up with a funeral home in the area, and we were able to have remains cremated, and we have little heart urns with their names and birth dates on them.
Oh, nice.
So we keep, yeah, and actually since we moved into our new house, we haven't put them up yet, but we always keep them somewhere where we could see them and look at them every day. Because as Jamie knows, there's not a day that goes by you don't relive all that and think about that.
And so how do you deal with that? I mean, is it just as we were kind of talking earlier, sometimes our memories, they get a little fuzzy and we don't know if that's a defense mechanism or what it is, but I mean, how do you deal with it? It's just a thought that comes up or what?
Yeah, I went through some therapy with a lady in town for a while, quite actually up until COVID hit and then changed all that. And I'm like, yeah, it's just too hard to keep doing this stuff online. And she really gave me a lot of really good coping mechanisms to use and helped me work through it. And I really feel like I am in a good place now because for the longest time I felt like this just how the heck do you go on living your life like normal when you have this story and everyone's constantly asking you, oh, you only have one child, are you going to have another kid? And what do you say to that? And I've gotten to the point now where, I'm not going to, I just tell people, oh, I've had a bunch of miscarriages. So, we prayed hard about it and we feel like we're in a good place right now. And we're very grateful for the daughter that we have with us right now.
She's
And,
wonderful.
she is wonderful. Yes, she's a handful, but she's wonderful. But for the longest time, I always felt like it would be such an awkward thing. Like people would say, oh, well, when are you going to have another one? They want a sibling. And I'd say that. And then it would be like, oh, they'd stop talking, And now I just don't let it be that way. I'm just like, it is what it is.
That's nice. I mean, good for you having strength in that. Because I'm sure some people that are listening to this, they maybe haven't found that strength yet. So thank you for sharing that because
Yeah.
that will tell them that that's okay. do that.
Right. And it honestly just takes time because I had a lot of people tell me that too. It's so hard right now, but in time it will get easier. And it does. It really does.
Yeah,
What
I
was the
can
second?
piggyback. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say what was the second part of the question? But yeah, you go ahead because you said you have to piggyback something off of that too.
I was just going to say, the more I talked about it, the easier it got.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like,
I
I
have a
think
whole
if you just stay
Yeah.
silent, and I think I've
Yeah.
learned through this process that, like, don't let it be awkward, and like,
Right.
they ask the question, give them the answer, you
Give 'em
know,
the answer,
like,
yeah. Yeah, I have a
Own
whole
it.
box of stuff too that I kept from the hospital, and people think this is funny, but I'm like, "No, I kept, like, they give you those massive pads that I never wore, I have them in there, I have all that stuff in there because I'm like, these are the memories I have of this pregnancy. You know, I don't have pictures other than a couple ultrasound pictures to remember this pregnancy by. You know, saving the things that you get from the hospital. I have all these packets of stuff that this Iris group gave us, and it's like, that stuff is near and dear to me.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, because that's what you have to hang on to.
Yes.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, so the second part of the question, Laura, was, angels. Did you ever feel the presence of angels? Were they
Oh,
giving you messages, anything like that? I mean, and maybe even now, years later, are they still talking to you about this?
yeah, well, the interesting thing there is I feel like Lauren sees that and points that out more than I ever do, especially with, she's really, really into the sunsets, so she'll always say, "Oh, my sister's up there, don't they look beautiful tonight?" And I'm like, "Oh, melt my heart."
Right? Oh my god. Well,
Yeah.
kids are, they're so open to all of that that they just glom onto it when, as we get older, we kind of start missing that. But I can tell you then as you continue to get older, it all becomes more relevant and prevalent again. Um, like when you were a kid. I don't know, maybe I'm gonna
Right.
be 8 or soon or something. Well, Laura, I know you
Yeah.
have to go because you have to pick
Yeah.
up Lauren. So thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us tonight.
Yes, thanks for
And
having me.
I'm just gonna yeah, and
Alright.
all the best and everything, and hopefully I'll see you soon. It's been a while.
Yeah. It's been a while. Yeah, hey, our wedding anniversary is tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
15 years. Yep, bye.
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 All right. So
Hello.
Jamie, let's continue on with your story. I
Yes.
do want to hear about the funeral because I mean, that is an important piece of this.
So it was hard because I feel like we did struggle with the, like, she was 25 weeks along, or I was 25 weeks along when we lost her. So by law, the body was our responsibility. At 22 and a half weeks is when that changes over. At least that's what it was at the time. I don't know if that's changed. At 22 and a half weeks, then it's kind of your choice to, like, keep the remains or the hospital can dispose of it. Which I know sounds morbid and all the things, but that was really the reality. Like, the hospital wasn't going to dispose of any because she was far enough along. So we did do cremation. And that in itself was hard because I feel like it wasn't as common or didn't feel as common, but at the time, and I don't know if maybe everything was just hard. Everything was a blur. Every decision at that moment felt heavy, I think. So signing to have a cremation but so we just did our funeral was just a burial. We did not do an in-service at a church. We just did with the pastor at the burial site. Rich and I got there early. We had picked out this beautiful little urn. It was actually an old jewelry box that we had engraved with her name on it. That it said, "Born an angel, always an angel" on the outside of the urn. The funeral home had glued it shut and everything. Well, we get to the funeral site and the burial site, and we decided, let's just get there a little early so we can just kind of cry, get all the tears out. Somewhat we felt like we were hosting, but yet somewhat we felt like, and I'm sure everyone who's like having a funeral feels this, but it's like you feel like you're hosting, but yet you don't really want to talk to anyone, but yet you want to talk to everyone. So we kind of were like, let's go early. We get to the funeral home or to the burial site, and the urn flies open. Like it was not glued. So me and Rich both look at each other. We're like, what's in there? Like afraid the ashes are going to literally fly away. They were wrapped in a bag and they were closed that we still have the ashes. But I can laugh about it now. But at the time we both looked at each other like, oh my, what are we doing? What do we do? Like people are coming in 15 minutes. What are we supposed to do? So we drive on the back of take his truck. We drive to Ace Hardware and we walk into the hardware store and ask the guy, do you have glue to glue an urn shut? And his facial expression alone, we're dressed up. We're both have been crying. We're laughing, but crying at the same time. And this guy's like, excuse me, what? I'm like, so we have this urn that isn't glued and it's supposed to be, and we have to bury it real fast, like real soon. Like it's coming. We got like 10 minutes. I need fast drying glue that's real strong. So and we sat on the back of Rich's tailgate in the parking lot at Ace Hardware, gluing the urn together. And all we both look at each other and going, she is up there going, thank God these two are not responsible for me. Like I am good being an angel today. So we were like, okay, well, this was our sign. We were not ready to be parents for whatever reason that was. So we get back to the funeral site and we are laughing so hard, which to everyone coming up as we're walking up, everybody's already there now. And we are trying not to laugh. We're crying, we're laughing. We're like, we'll tell you later. Well, let's just proceed. So we get through the burial. We finally get back. We had a luncheon at Diane, at Rich's mom's house and telling everybody and it lightened the day. Like as much as it was such a sad day, it was like that little bit of light that like, if you can't laugh your way through it, you're just going to cry, and it's going to like, you can cry, but find the happy, funny moments, find the humor in life, or you'll never survive. That was kind of my first sight. I know you asked Laura this, but I think the hardest part about the whole thing, well, number one was going in there and them like basically saying, you should be dead right now, like me personally. So like the baby's not alive anymore, but now we have to focus on keeping you alive. And I think that was the scariest part, that like, I never really conceptualized that like a pregnancy could kill me. Like, I don't know that I ever, right. But I know that people die during childbirth and they die, but like, I just never had that in my head that a pregnancy could kill me. I knew you could lose a baby. I knew you could have a miscarriage, but that in my head was really hard. To like,
so what did you grab onto in that moment? I mean, what were the thoughts going through your head to get you through it?
I mean, every emotion first: anger, mad, happy I wasn't dead, that I was still alive. I think, I wish I could pinpoint one thing. I think it was the amount of people that surrounded us. I think it was having people that came and didn't ask questions. They just sat and they just let me cry. Again, humor was definitely something we used to get through it. We did take pictures. I know Laura alluded to taking pictures. We had Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep is an organization that comes into the hospitals and takes pictures of stillborns and or infant loss, like if they've never lost the hospital, so you can have that memory of them in the hospital. So I have a whole photo album of us holding her, pictures of just her. And she was under a pound. So she was so small. We have pictures of her hands, of her feet. Our rings could go around her ankle completely. But then my youngest sister, again, we lived through laughter. My sister, like we showed her some of the pictures when we finally got them back, and we were still in the hospital. They came so fast. Like they took the pictures, and that afternoon we already had the album. Like it was like that quick turnaround for like a photography. And it's volunteer photographers that sign up to be part of this organization. So it's when they know they're going in for it, they just plan. That's what their whole moment will be, is getting these pictures to these families as soon as possible. And my sister goes, so is this going to be your Christmas card this year? I'm like, probably not. But that's how we just laugh through things. So I think humor and just knowing people around us truly would just be there through the thick and thin, through the days I just wanted to cry, the days I wanted to, tell jokes. So that initial part, I think we used humor a ton. That was a big part to kind of laugh through it.
Right. So I'm going to move us on. I'm going to jump
Mhm.
us ahead because your oldest, Livy,
Yes,
she had a bit of a tough beginning also,
she did.
and now she's thriving. So just give us a little bit what you're
It was
comfortable
not-
with.
Yeah. So we struggled to get pregnant again because we had struggled to get pregnant the first time, and then we lost the baby, and it was kind of, when do we go back to treatment? So we finally decided to set a date that we were going to go back to treatment. And we found out 2 months earlier that we were pregnant. So it was like, okay, I guess it's going to happen naturally this time. So we got pregnant with my whole history of the first one. I don't think I ever truly accepted that I was going to bring home a baby. I don't know that I ever really believed it until the day I got to bring my girl home. So then when she was born, I went on to bed rest. I had severe preeclampsia, so super high blood pressure again. My kidneys were failing. And I went on to bed rest when I was 28 weeks along because my blood pressure had started to climb. And then I attended my sister's wedding while on bed rest. And I had a best friend come with me who's like a by the books person. So she timed me. I got 20 minutes on my feet, and then I had to lay down, and I laid in the pews at the wedding. And so did not get to attend the reception, but went home. That next week, I ended up in the hospital on bed rest. So I had kidneys were failing too much. They couldn't keep me at home. So in the hospital, I was in the hospital a total of 2.5 weeks. By the time they decided my kidneys function was too poor. So I had Livy that day. And in some ways, you talked about when angels show up. That was a day, like as much as she was coming early, that was a day that an angel showed up. Because as much as I knew the first pregnancy, I could tell myself it was not my fault. Going back for just a split second, I made a book about the whole pregnancy and everything, a picture book. I have pictures of the pregnancy. I have pictures of the baby, letters that people sent, poems that people sent. And it wasn't until I printed that book from whatever Snapchat or whatever program it was that I used, was I able to find joy, that I didn't feel guilty for being happy. Because there was many days I felt guilt. Like I'd find something funny, but then I felt guilty about it and I'd cry about it. And it was a very vicious cycle. I did go on some antidepressants at the time for a very short period, but it helped bridge the gap of getting those emotions where they should be stabilized. But I think, like I said, through that pregnancy, I didn't really believe I was going to bring a baby home. Like I heard the heartbeat, I saw all the tests, I saw the ultrasound, but it was like my sister was pregnant at the time and she had said a couple times, I just don't feel like you're excited. And I'm like, no, I am. But it was like, I really don't think, looking back, hindsight, I don't know that I was too scared that my outcome would be the same. So in some ways, I think an angel showed up saying, this is off of your body now. The doctors are going to do the rest. So you don't have to carry that burden for the next 10 weeks. So she came 9.5 weeks early. She was the healthiest 32-week-old you could possibly have. She was as small as she could possibly be. She was very small, but it meant she was just under 32 weeks, which meant she got to have a brain ultrasound. Her brain ultrasound looked amazing. She was just under the weight to be considered where she would get NICU follow-up from 1 until 5 to make sure that she stayed healthy and on track from 1 until she turned 5. She was just under the birth weight where she got to get all of the Synagis shots, which are super expensive shots. They give them for 5 months over the first winter of their life, and it's to prevent RSV. I was pregnant long enough and on bed rest where she got to get both of the shots to get her lungs strong. So the angel showed up saying, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Your body doesn't have to bear this stress anymore. You did your job. Now let's give it to somebody else where you can just be mom and just have the joy and the happy days. And she really never had a bad day in the NICU. We had days where she didn't eat as much, but she was a very healthy NICU baby. So that, as much as delivering early was scary and horrible, and it was the day that like they said, it's okay, you get to be a mom still. So for me, that was definitely, I was relieved. And that sounds like a horrible thing to say, to have a newborn that's little and tiny, but I felt like I was okay. So, and I was going to be alive to take care of her and raise her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, knowing the previous history, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just as somebody who maybe didn't know that, they might question it a little bit. But when you hear the whole story, it makes perfect sense. And then you've got Avery too, who is...
She was gone again. We didn't know if we would be able to. We'd stopped birth control, and a month later, there she was. She was here. It was at that pregnancy, we had decided if this one goes to term, we would love to have 3, and we would try again right away. If she does not make it to term, then we were done. Then, my body had done its job. I became a mom. He became a dad. We're going to raise these kids with all the love that they possibly can have. So she ended up delivering a little bit early. They were nervous that I was going to end up having a stroke, that I was with asymptomatic, because I was having horrible headaches, but I felt they were tolerable, but I wasn't sleeping. So I hadn't slept. I was now inpatient at the hospital, and I hadn't slept in like 36 hours. And so the nurse actually is the one that said, I'm going to throw in the towel because she won't, but the babies need to come. So we had 2 more days until I would have been considered like no NICU needed if everything looked good. But the nurse was like, she hasn't slept in 36 hours. She's telling you she feels fine, but I've come in every 2 hours and she's wide awake watching TV or reading a book or doing an art project or something, because I just couldn't sleep. So the nurse, another angel, said, it's time. She will be just fine. The baby needs to come. And Avery came, and she got to come home on Valentine's Day the next week. So yeah. So many times.
Doing great.
They are. Yeah. I mean, they're happy, healthy, typical, average, excelling children. So, but I will share one other thing with you. I know you asked Laura this, is when they show up. So when Livia, more so than Avery, but when Livia was in preschool, the daycare never told me, or the daycare never told me this until much later. But one day they said to me something about, they always thought she had an imaginary friend named Angel.
Oh, okay.
And so they had never said anything to me about it. They just kind of went along with it. Like, kids have imaginary friends all the time, so no big deal. Well, then there was one nap time that she said, well, I just want to say goodnight to Angel. And they were like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I just want to say goodnight to her. And, I hope she's having a nap. Well, then Livy told me that Angel had come and talked to her that day in her nap. And I was like, so then the daycare asked me, they're like, she keeps talking about this Angel. And I was like, okay. So then they kind of came up. We thought it was an imaginary friend. And I was like, it's her big sister that had passed away. It's her older sister that is her guardian angel. but we've never shied away from having conversation about it with her. She knows that she has an older sister that's in heaven. And Livy told me that day, she's like, well, Mom, I just wanted you to know that Angel said she was happy and she was on the swings with Grandma Betty, which is my grandma's name, who had passed not like right after I got married. And no one called her Betty. We all called her Grandma Ebel. So we never would have said Betty. And she's like, no, they're just playing. And she looks like, she was trying to tell me what she looks like, the dress she was wearing. So it was like all these little moments. And Livy would come back and say, do you know what Angel did today? No, what did she do? She went and played with Becky today, who is my husband's sister, who passed away almost 22 years ago now, I think.
Has it been that long? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. She would be 44 this year. So she passed away when she was 22. So I think it's been 21 technically, but
it doesn't seem like that long. Wow.
I know. So it was like, no, she played with Aunt Becky, and they were, playing with Winnie the Pooh, which was Becky's favorite thing. So it was these little stories where she just would come up, and it was like, okay, she's okay. I'm okay because she's okay. She is truly an angel, and she is living an angel life perfectly the way she was meant to live. So,
and looking out for Livy and all of the rest of you too.
Yes.
So, well, Jamie, thank you so much
for
sharing your story, your whole family's story. And they're always just amazing to me. And the angels, I think as moms, I think the angels have sort of a special place in their hearts for us.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I love sharing my story.
Thanks again for joining Chaplain Jody on Survivor Angels. For more information, go to chaplainjody.me. That's chaplainjody.me. And on Facebook at Survivor Angels-Chaplain Jody. Sound effects for the show created by Andre Opate and provided by Pixbay. This is Dave Schrader. Until next time, sending you off to activate your angels.